With no hockey on the ice, we're left to discuss what's going to happen either next season or if this season gets resumed. And when we finally get hockey back, the players I'm going to talk about today could very well be part of the NHL rosters that they've signed with. In today's video, we're going to take a look at some of the recent free agent signings coming from Europe and what they will bring to the respective teams. So, let's get right into it. And we're going to start off with probably the most talked about and hyped player. It's defenseman Mikko Lehtonen, who was signed by the Toronto Maple Leafs yesterday. Lehtonen, who was 26 years old, spent last season in the KHL playing for Jokerit, where he put up an amazing 49 points in 60 games, which was the most points from any defenseman in the KHL, and he also scored 17 goals, which again was the most of any defenseman. And he was regarded as one of the best, if not the best defenseman in the KHL this past season, and some people have gone as far to say that he's the best defenseman outside the NHL, period. He also collected a bunch of awards and accolades this season. 3-time Defenseman of the Month, he was in the KHL All-Star Game, and like I mentioned, he put up the most points of any defenseman in the KHL, so this is a player who knows how to produce. And if we're going to take a quick look at what makes him so good, it's like in most cases these days, his skating and mobility. He's fast, he's agile, and we can bring that together with a great shot, because he did score 17 goals, so it's pretty good. Along with his passing, you get a real beast on the blue line and the power play. And if we're going to try to predict where he's going to play with the Leafs, because I think he's making the NHL out of training camp, it's most likely going to be on the third pairing. And I would also like to see him get some power play time on that second power play unit. It's going to take some time for him to get into the NHL rhythm, but if he gets time on the power play and gets comfortable, gets a couple of points, I think he could maybe take a top 4 role for the Leafs eventually, but putting him on the third pairing would be the sensible thing to do here. Overall, I think this is a great signing, and I was a bit surprised that the Leafs signed them because the rumor was that LA, Montreal and New Jersey were in for him the most, but the Leafs got him, and to that I say congratulations. Next up, we have Mathias Bromé, who was finally signed by the Detroit Red Wings, and I say finally because it felt like we heard rumors about this for months. But it finally happened, and what can Wings fans expect from this speedy winger? Well, I probably gave it away by saying speedy, but that's what he is. He's fast, he's very fast, and he's probably one of the fastest skaters in the SHL, and that played a part in him getting 43 points in 52 games this season, which made him the best point scorer on his team and the 6th best in the entire SHL. Other than his skating, he's also got a pretty good shot, he's a decent playmaker, so I wouldn't expect him to fill a top 6 role in Detroit, although he might get a chance at times given how the Detroit roster isn't that deep, but I see him as a 3rd or 4th liner, especially with the speed he's got and the fact that he's a really good forechecker. He could be an impact player for the Red Wings, but the question is if he's going to start the season in the NHL or the AHL, and I'm going to say the NHL because why not? The Red Wings have nothing to lose, so they might as well play him. I like the signing, it's just a shame that it dragged on for so long, but Detroit finally have him, and it's a really good signing. Moving on, we have a big check on our hands here. It's Radim Zohorna, who is a 24-year-old 6'6" forward from the Czech League, where last season he put up a career best 22 points in 46 games. And this was good enough to intrigue several NHL teams, but Zohorna decided to sign with the Penguins. So what can we expect from this big guy? Well, GM Rutherford described Zohorna as a, quote, smart player with good hockey sense that uses his big size to his advantage. And that doesn't really say too much about him. We know that he's big, and that gives you certain advantages, but also disadvantages. But I'm reading up on him and watching his highlights, and his skating's actually pretty good for such a big man, and he does look pretty good. Apparently he was a Penguins fan growing up as well, and he's got his mind set on making the Penguins team. Despite his goal of making the NHL, I'd say he'll start off in the AHL, but knowing the Penguins and their luck with injuries, he might get a call up to the NHL during the season, and if he gets that call up, he's probably gonna be on the 3rd or 4th line. It's time for the youngest player on my list, and it's Swedish defenseman Johannes Kinnvall, who is 22 years old. And while he did sign a 2-year deal with the Calgary Flames, he's gonna go back to the SHL and his team HV71, where he spent his last 2 seasons, and this last season was his best thus far. 40 points in 51 games as a defenseman made him the 8th best point scorer in the SHL and 2nd best defenseman when it comes to points in the entire league. Kinnvall is an offensive defenseman with a great shot. Some of his goals have been absolute bombs from the point. He's mobile, he's crafty, and he's not the biggest guy, so he's basically a prototypical modern offensive defenseman. And that's where the problem lies, unfortunately. There's a reason why he's not coming over to the NHL this season. He's just not ready physically or defensively yet. Yes, he puts up a lot of points, he's really skilled, and he's been a consistent goal scorer from the blue line in his 2 seasons in the SHL, but Kinnvall knows he's not ready yet, and the Flames agree, and that's why he's going back to the SHL for another season. But once he does come over to North America, I think he can be pretty good. I wouldn't expect incredible numbers from him, but he just needs to improve his defensive game and get a bit bigger because the offense is already there, and he's still young, so there's definitely time to develop. I really like this signing by the Flames, and like with all the other signings, there's no risk involved either. I started off my list with a newly signed Leaf, and I'm ending it with one as well. Alexander Barabanov was actually signed almost a month ago, but he still qualifies for my list. Barabanov is a 25-year-old Russian winger, although he'll be 26 in June, so he might have turned 26 whenever the season restarts or when the NHL is back. Anyway, Barabanov put up 20 points in 43 games last season, which is a bit curious considering the fact that he put up 46 points in 50 games last year, so I don't know what happened there. Someone can tell me in the comments. The Leafs signing this guy kind of reminds me how they signed Ilya Mikheyev last year. Similar age, similar production when they had their best season if you compare them. And Mikheyev was a player I really like the look of, and he seems like he's been able to transition his game from the KHL into the NHL. We'll see if Barabanov can do that as well, but what kind of game does he play? He's real nifty, crafty, skilled, whatever word you want to use to describe a technically gifted winger that isn't that big. Barabanov is 5'10", and I don't think that would be too much of a problem if I'm being honest. But I haven't gotten into my favorite part of his game yet, his skating. I mean, come on, this guy's edge work is insane. I was blown away at some of the clips I saw of him, and although he might not be able to replicate it in the NHL all the time, it's still beautiful to see those edges work, and it's good to know that he's got that in his bag of tricks. He's gonna play in the bottom 6 if I'm gonna make a prediction, and he's gonna play that role very well. It's always nice to have that speed and creativity on the bottom lines, and he's gonna chip in a few goals here and there, and maybe even some shorthanded goals if he gets PK time. So, those were some of the European free agent signings that caught my attention. There's still a few I didn't talk about, like Nils Höglander getting signed by the Canucks, but I don't think he's making the NHL next season, and I've already talked about him here on the channel before. I really like him, I think he's got some underrated aspects to his game, but I don't think he's ready yet. Anyway, what player are you most excited about? Is it Lehtonen? Is it Bromé? Tell me in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one.